Welcome back to Coffee Break with Trail Youth. This is Derek. I'm here with my mom, Dylin.
Hi.
As well as Kristen.
Hello.
And today we're going to be continuing our series, Family Ties, by talking about generational differences. I've found, and to me at least, in what I've looked into as well as personal interactions and experience, it seems like baby boomers seem to have the hardest time transitioning to newer technologies.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely agree with that.
And then the generation that has not as hard a time, but still can have a hard time transitioning to newer technology is Generation X. There are some in Generation X who transition and adapt to newer technologies better than others, but then there are also some who have a harder time transitioning than others. It's sort of a...
That would be me, Derek.
Yeah, probably. It's
I can see that.
Flip a coin. Flip a coin. Yeah, like my mom adapts to new technology really well and has worked as a service provider for AT&T?
Sprint.
And then there's
customer service rep.
Yeah, and then there's you, Kristen, who I've had to solve I don't know how many technology problems for.
Yes.
And then there's the millennials, who most of them seem to be able to adapt to newer technology well, but there are some who don't adapt very well. However, those are the more rarer ones, it seems at least. And that's just with technology, which is what's focused on a lot more of the time. But then there's also newer ideas and ideals. And in my experience, a lot more from Gen X and millennials seem to be able to adapt to newer ideas and theories. There are more Gen X and baby boomers, more people from Gen X and from the baby boomers that are transphobic and don't adapt to the LGBTQ ideals as much or as well as some of the people from the millennials and from Generation Z do.
So, just to clarify in my own head, basically what you're saying is that the people that are saying, you're shoving the LGBTQ agenda down my throat, are those from the baby boomer and the Generation X generations.
Not necessarily.
But most of them.
I'm not saying that the ones who are saying that, but it's the people who are more against it and are being trans is wrong, being gay is wrong. That's a lot more from generationally. That's a lot more from those generations. But then there's also, and this is one that really bugs me a lot, is with the millennials, and after the millennials came Gen Z. And Gen Z, from the generation of the millennials and previous generations as well, there's a common opinion that in those generations, it was safer than it is in this current generation, which I believe is Gen Z. Millennials, the baby boomers, Gen X, and Gen Y, or the millennials, those were all safer generations than Gen Z is. And I disagree with that. What about you, Kristen? What are your guys' thoughts on it?
So you're feeling that today is much safer than back in baby boomers or Gen X? Yeah, I feel like for me it was a lot safer back in Gen X, and same with baby boomers. I think with baby boomers they had more of a national threat with the Cuban Missile Crisis and
they were
things
a
that.
war. The baby boomers came right after a war.
Right. So maybe in that regards they may not have felt as safe. But today I feel like because of social media, there's so much more predators.
Yeah.
Easier access to predators now.
Yeah.
Through social media. And so you have to really be aware of that. Or, hearing stories about my mom being able to go out in the street of the neighborhood and play and stuff like that. Whereas now it's, okay, things are more indoors, or we're very having to arrange play dates. We don't just let our kids out the door and run around.
Because it's not considered illegal to in many states. You get CPS called on you if you send your kids outside to play.
Yeah, you get...
And that's what I don't understand. To me, that's messed up. That it's illegal and you can't send your kid out to play outside without, supervision or whatever. And you can't let your kid go out and, on the weekend, it can't just be see you later, Mom. You're just alright, get home before dark. Kids alright. You can't really do that with your kids, and most kids can't do that and just go out and do whatever they want. if you try to do that, then it seems like all the time you get what's called like the helicopter parent more is the ones who like interrogate you before letting you even try to walk out the door.
Well, I think it's too because I don't know. There's a lot of pressure on parents, and you
Well,
get judged if you don't know where your kid is at every
Yeah.
single second.
Well, I gave the worst case scenario first, but then there are also parents who are more lenient and who are less restrictive and more lenient, and are the ones who are like text me and like check in with us every other hour or whatever.
What time are you going to be home
Or-
tonight?
Yeah,
Right.
stuff like that. Like they'll ask you the basic questions. It's not just like, all right, see you later, kiddo. Don't die. It's
Yeah. What time are you going to be home tonight?
Right.
what
If
time
you're
are you
not
gonna be
gonna be
home? Like, are you planning on hanging out with people? Like, are you planning on going to these places in specific? It's like, yeah, I plan on being home at this time. I might end up like hanging out with these people. Might encounter other friends along the way. I don't know. And I plan on at least going here and here. Might stop by other places.
Okay.
Stuff like that.
Text me if your plans change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are
Keep
parents
me
who do
updated
that.
during the day.
But then there's also like the more restrictive, the parents who like insist on the kid's phone having like a tracker on it, and like the parent has to constantly know where they are, who they're with, what they're doing, la da 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 da.
Yeah.
The like not quite helicopter parents, but they're not the less restrictive ones. And I know from hearing from your children, Kristen, that you're quite a bit like my mom as well.
Yeah, we're pretty laid back. We just ask, like, if they run, if just to be back on time, and if they can't be back on time, then just call or send us a text.
Yeah,
so
let
that
them-
way we're not worried, or we know that they're not stranded on the side of the road and need help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not
so,
like bleeding out in a ditch somewhere.
Right. So in between the time that they're supposed to arrive home, then I don't worry about it. I don't stress about it. And they're usually they're very good at just, hey, texting me or giving me a phone call. And we've never had any issues.
Like-
We've had a few.
Yeah.
And then I find it
but-
kind of funny because on the thought of like this generation being like more dangerous, you do agree that you think it's more dangerous than it was back then.
Mhm.
And with your point of there being like social media opening up like easier access for like people to be like predatory and such, then I can sort of agree with that, and I can see where you're coming from with that.
Mhm.
But then it's also somewhat safer because of technology. And I think a reason that a lot of people think it's more dangerous is if you look at the news, what is it going to tell you? This crime happened. Well, this crime happened. This like bad thing happened. There was an accident here. All sorts of like things of tragedy or like crime. And it makes people think that it's more dangerous. Another reason why I think people might think it's more dangerous is because of the influence that news has. And humans like to hear about other people's like troubles and stuff.
Mhm.
And it's like I think the reason humans like it is because it's like that's happening to them, not us.
Yeah, because
That's
the news.
one thing.
Like, I have friends that they've gone over to other countries, and it's just like, oh my goodness, you're going over there? Well, yeah, we went over there, and it's like a whole lot safer than it is over in America. It's nothing like what the news is saying.
Yeah.
So you're right. The news does just hone in on all this negative stuff that makes us feel that things are a lot more unsafe. But at the same time, my feeling is that drugs are more rampant and a lot more easily accessible, which is creating maybe different kinds of crime. I feel that's what's making it very unsafe, because my kids have gone to school and they have been approached, hey, you want a drug? So it's not like I can just send my kids to school now and trust that they're not going to, run into drug dealers. No, it's everywhere now. And the point is, I have to really train them hard and be very, very careful about how we're teaching and training them to make sure that when their friend approaches them and says, hey, want some drugs or something, I can sell you a pill, they can say no, and they can understand why.
So they're
this
able
isn't
to
good.
both resist peer pressure and understand why they shouldn't do whatever.
Exactly. So I feel like the dangers are more open.
Yeah.
maybe,
And I
than
feel
when-
like a factor that plays into the availability of drugs and such is partially due to population. We have, in my opinion at least, it seems like there's more people in the world now than there were back then.
Mhm.
Yes.
And because of that, like bigger and part of the reason it can't be covered at school and why it is able to like happen at school is because of overpopulation. Teachers, I think at Mount Si, they have 35 to 40 kids in a class at once or something like that.
Yes.
That's way too many students for one teacher to cover. And how packed the halls are makes it so that like you can't watch everything at once.
Right.
Some things are gonna slip by. And I feel like that does play a part in it.
Well, I think too, funding also plays a part in it. So if a school can't get the funds to appropriately staff to watch out for these things,
Yeah.
I mean, teachers can't do it all and they can't see anything. So it's definitely not a negative thing towards the schools.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything bad
Yeah.
about the schools.
It's just, I think it's an issue though that the country as a whole needs to start addressing and being like, okay, our schools across the country here, just that the drugs are very easily accessible and
Yeah.
there's
we
not a whole lot of
need to crack
consequences
down.
for drugs, you know, it's just...
That is true.
there's
I
not.
don't really seem to find any like really big things. Like I think hearing about people who had drugs at like school or whatever, like if they get caught with them, like what happens? They get suspended, maybe like expelled at worst. But
Maybe.
other than that,
Yeah,
is there really
maybe.
any other things than that? Not
Yeah.
that I seem to hear about.
No, it's not a scary enough consequence that would deter somebody from
Yeah.
actually doing
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
The
So it's-
one kid that I know of that had drugs at school and was selling them at school. Actually, I know two of them now that I think about it. But one of them, it took him getting caught 3 times selling drugs at school before they expelled him.
Yeah. And I know someone who sold drugs at school and they got caught and then it took them like I think they had to have something like I think they had LSD on them and that's what it took for them to get kicked out. And even then, they didn't get kicked out of like the district or whatever. They just got kicked out of that school. And so they had like plenty of other schools to go to. And then there's another thing of even if you are the one that gets caught with them on you, I know of one person who said that they got it from like this person, even when they hadn't, and the person that they said gave it to them got kicked out instead.
Yeah, I think that's why I feel nowadays this generation is a lot more unsafe than our generation.
Now you've heard about differing opinions and points of view on generational differences and what we think on it, as well as different points of view on the safety of our current generation and how safe we are in our time. So this concludes our episode on Coffee Break with Trail Youth. Be sure to join us on our next episode as we continue to talk about family ties. You can find us on Facebook at The Trail and Instagram at Trail Youth Coffee Home. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Make sure you check out our website at trailyouth.com. See ya!